everyone, I'm Kevin Nelson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin with news from around the country. Funeral arrangements have been set for President George H.W. Bush. The 41st President of the United States passed away late November 30th at the age of 94 at his home in Houston. The late president's body will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol Rotunda through the early morning of December 5th. The funeral service will be held at 11 a.m. that day at the National Episcopal Cathedral in Washington. President Donald Trump designated December 5th as a national day of mourning for President Bush. After the funeral service, President Bush's body will be flown back to College Station, Texas, where he will be laid to rest at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library, where wife Barbara, who died in April of this year, and their daughter Robin, who died at age 3, are buried. In a statement, the president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Cardinal Daniel DiNardo, who heads the Archdiocese of Galveston-Houston, remembered the late president as one who spent his life selflessly in service of his country with an unwavering commitment to building bridges of peace and ensuring our nation's freedoms. The cardinal said he also inspired many as a devoted husband, father, and family patriarch. Looking now at news from the Vatican, Pope Francis met with the Palestinian president of the Vatican December 3rd. The two spoke privately for about 20 minutes, renewing their commitment to peace in the Holy Land.
Like the other 3 times they met, the meeting between Pope Francis and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas took place in a very cordial atmosphere. They confronted sensitive issues of an international nature. They talked about the process of reconciliation of the Palestinian people, of peace with Israel, and above all, of Jerusalem's status. The Vatican communique recalled that the Holy See has always defended the preservation of Jerusalem's identity as the holy city for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. This situation changed just a year ago when the U.S. announced that it would transfer its embassy to Israel. Pope Francis gave Abbas this medallion of St. Peter and delivered his message for the World Day of Peace before a heartfelt farewell.
In a statement released after their meeting, the Vatican said the two leaders focused on efforts to reactivate the peace process between Israelis and Palestinians and to reach a two-state solution, hoping for a renewed commitment on the part of the international community to meet the legitimate aspirations of both peoples. More news from Rome. In a new book interview by Father Fernando Prado titled The Strength of Vocation, Consecrated Life Today, Pope Francis says that homosexuality is a very serious matter which must be discerned adequately from the beginning with candidates for formation. The Pope said that seminary and religious formation programs must be updated to help seminarians and candidates understand themselves and the obligations of celibacy, promote maturity, and enable discernment about whether a candidate is ready to be able to live a celibate life. The Pope went on to say that homosexual priests, religious men and women should be urged to live celibacy wholly and especially to be perfectly responsible, trying to never create scandal in their communities or for the holy people of God by living a double life. The Pope said it would be better if they left the ministry or consecrated life rather than live a double life. Excerpts of the Pope's interview with Father Prado, which was conducted in August, were printed in newspapers December 1st ahead of the book's release. More news from the Vatican. A recent conference was just held at the Vatican focusing on addictions, including drugs, gambling, and internet pornography. The conference was entitled Drugs and Addictions, an Obstacle to Integral Human Development. Rome Reports has more from the Vatican.
Drugs are not the only addiction of the 21st century. As technology improves, it has also created avenues for new dependencies to arise. At the Vatican, dozens of experts have exposed the wounds left by gambling and other addictions. Noriko Tanaka explains that in Japan, gambling is very difficult to combat because families rarely reach out to specialists. There is shame associated with acknowledging the downfalls of a family member. The expert says that in her country, gambling addiction affects 3.6% of the population.
Japan has very loose regulations when it comes to gambling. The Japanese government has not made any real steps in addressing gambling addiction in the country. This is a disease that makes people hate themselves and feel deeply ashamed.
The other big question the Vatican Congress confronted was the dependency of internet porn. For over 20 years, Peter Klepenis has been studying how the technological revolution has impacted people's sexual behavior.
Well, we're now finding that it is an addictive substance, and this is coming from the neuroscience community where they've compared brain scans from drug addicts with sex addicts, and they're both identical. Well, there was actually a study done 2 years ago on that, and what we found is that over 50% of men in the United States look at pornography at least once a month. About 40% actually look at it several times a week, so this is a major problem in our country. And it's not just a men's issue anymore. Women are viewing pornography at much greater rates. We know that a third of all visitors to pornographic websites are women.
Behind these addictions hides a giant business. According to Klepenes, pornography produces $100 billion a year worldwide. The business of gambling makes much more. According to the consulting firm H.W. Gambling Capital, gambling moved about $196.2 billion in 2017 in the United States alone.
And finally in the news, Pope Francis met at the Vatican with residents and supporters of Rondine Citadel of Peace, a peace and reconciliation project based in central Italy. The Rondine project hosts young people from nations that have experienced or still experience war and conflict. According to the organization's website, the young people live, study, and work together, discovering their so-called enemy as a human being like them. In his remarks, the Pope told the group that leaders who do not make an effort to go meet the enemy, to sit with them at a table and do what you do, they cannot lead their people to peace. To do this, he said, requires humility and not arrogance. To celebrate the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, representatives of Rondine were to address all 193 member states of the United Nations December 10th in New York to ask that every government redirect a small sum from its defense budget and put it toward training new global leaders who can intervene wherever there are major conflicts. Pope Francis, who was told about the appeal, praised the initiative and said he will support the effort and ask all heads of state and government to do the same. Well, that is all the information we have for you at this time. I'm Kevin Nelson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week with Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV network.